misconceptions about love and relationships. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening. We all think we know how life is supposed to go. You graduate, you get a job, you fall in love, you build a life. We're all given a map, a well trodden path to follow. But what happens when life rips that map to shreds and sends you down a road that isn't in any of the guidebooks? A road that is as thrilling as it is terrifying? Today's story is from Alex, a young man just starting his adult life. He thought he was just looking for a room to rent in the big city. Instead, he found a world he never knew existed. A world with two extraordinary women, two aunts by circumstance, who would teach him more about love, loneliness, and the different shapes a family can take than he ever thought possible. This is a unique story, and I promise it will make you think. Right now, as I speak, I live with two aunts. No, I wasn't abandoned by my parents. I'm not an orphan. However, my life with these two fascinating women, who aren't related to me by blood, has become more intense, more exciting, and more deeply fulfilling than anything I could have ever imagined. I'm still in my 20s, in the prime of my life, but I'll be honest, sometimes I feel physically exhausted. After all, both of them have a surprising, powerful fire inside them, and most nights don't just end after one go-around. If you're curious, let me tell you about this unique living situation, one that I'm sure will surprise you. It all started with a piece of good news. Just after graduating from college, I landed a job in New York City. In this economy, finding any job felt like a miracle. Finding one in the city of my dreams felt like winning the lottery. I'm originally from a small town in Ohio, and for my entire 4 years of college, I'd been living with my older sister, Sarah, and her husband in their apartment in Queens. She got married a few years ago, and while I knew I was a constant imposition on a newlywed couple, I was deeply indebted to them. My brother-in-law, Mark, was a genuinely kind guy and always treated me well. My sister took care of me, making sure I ate properly, all while gently nagging me to hurry up and get a job so you can get out of our hair. The real tension came whenever Mark's parents came to visit. They never said anything overtly nasty, but I could feel their eyes on me, judging me. I felt like I was sitting on a bed of needles. Their silent disapproval made it clear they saw me as a freeloader, a grown man still mooching off his sister. To make matters worse, Sarah and Mark hadn't had children yet, and a paranoid part of me wondered if my presence, my occupation of their spare room, was somehow getting in the way. So I made a promise to myself. The second I got a job, I was out. I had to become independent. And against all odds, my wish came true. When I told my sister and her husband that I'd found a job and was planning to move out, they initially tried to stop me. "Stay a little longer, Alex," Sarah said, her voice full of genuine concern. "Save up some money. Living alone in New York is brutally expensive." I was grateful for their kindness, but I couldn't continue to be the third wheel in their marriage. The euphoria of landing the job quickly gave way to a massive, terrifying problem. Housing. I had zero savings. The security deposit and first month's rent for a typical NYC apartment were an impossible dream. My only option was to find a room for rent. But the prices were astronomical. I spent weeks scrolling through listings, looking at depressing photos of shoebox-sized rooms in sketchy neighborhoods for prices that made my head spin. I was getting so desperate that I started seriously considering a bunk bed in a shared hostel room, but the thought made my skin crawl. It was around that time that I met up for a beer with my best friend from college, Kevin. We hadn't seen each other in a while. Kevin's life was a lot easier than mine. His family was wealthy, so he was in no rush to join the rat race. As the night wore on, I found myself pouring out all my anxieties to him. The guilt of living with my sister, the soul-crushing apartment hunt, the fear of ending up in a windowless room. As I was venting, Kevin suddenly sat up. "Hey, wait a second," he said, a light bulb going off in his head. "My aunt is looking to rent out a room in her apartment. Are you interested? You should at least go see it." The aunt Kevin was talking about was Amelia, who would soon become a central figure in this story. Amelia had gotten divorced in her early 50s. She'd been living alone in a large apartment ever since her ex-husband moved out, and she'd finally decided to rent out a room because the place felt too big and too lonely. I was immediately intrigued. An introduction from a friend meant I could probably trust her, and maybe, just maybe, I could get a break on the rent. I asked Kevin if he could talk to his aunt for me. He pulled out his phone and called her right there at the bars. While Kevin was on the phone, my heart was pounding with a mixture of hope and anxiety. She hasn't found anyone yet, Kevin said, after hanging up. She said she'll text you her contact info. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Amelia. With trembling hands, I called her. The voice on the other end was warm, elegant, and surprisingly youthful. "Oh, you're Kevin's friend," she said, her voice smiling. "I've heard good things about you. Why don't you come by and see the place?" The address she gave me was shockingly close to my new office. More than that, it was her voice, so gentle and kind, that made up my mind. I decided to go see the apartment that evening. It was in an older pre-war building on a quiet, tree-lined street that felt miles away from the chaos of Manhattan. For someone who had been mentally preparing for a hostel, the building itself felt like a palace. I rang the bell, my heart filled with a desperate hope that she would approve of me. When the door opened, I met Amelia for the first time. She was far more beautiful and vibrant than I had ever expected. It was impossible to guess her age. She had the kind of timeless elegance that some women just possess. She clearly took great care of herself. She was wearing black leggings and a fitted athletic top, probably from doing yoga at home, and the tight lines of her outfit drew my eyes in a way that made me feel a strange, unexpected blush. Her face was impeccably put together with a smile that was both warm and a little bit sad. Amelia led me into a spacious living room. She offered me some tea and told me to make myself comfortable on the sofa. While she was in the kitchen, I quietly looked around. The apartment, though in an older building, had been beautifully renovated. It was clean, stylish, and filled with art. It was definitely too large for one person to live in alone, a sprawling 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. "You're younger than I imagined," she said as she handed me a cup of tea. She smiled. "But you seem to have a kind personality. That's a relief." Her smile put me at ease. Amelia explained that she wasn't renting the room for the money. In fact, she had originally been looking for a female tenant and hadn't even considered a man. But because I was Kevin's friend and he had vouched for me, she had made an exception. Then she started to talk about her own situation. She told me about her difficult divorce, about her son who was studying abroad in Europe. I got the sense that, having been alone for so long, she was starved for conversation. I listened intently, making sure to nod and offer sympathetic comments. My sister had once told me that half of communicating with women is just learning how to listen. So I looked her in the eyes and gave her my full, undivided attention. After a while, Amelia seemed to visibly relax. A lightness returned to her expression. "You know," she said, "we haven't spoken much, but I feel like I can communicate well with you, so when would you like to move in?" When I nervously asked about the rent, she said, "How does $300 a month sound? No deposit necessary." I was stunned. Even a bunk bed in a shared room would cost at least $500. This was an unbelievable act of kindness. That's incredibly generous. "Thank you so much," I stammered. "I can move in this weekend if that's okay." As I was getting ready to leave, Amelia added one more thing. "Oh, by the way, there's one other person living here with me. She's an old friend of mine, Isabella. She's also divorced. The apartment was just too big, so we decided to live together to keep each other company." At the time, I didn't think much of it. In fact, I thought it might be better to have another person around. If it were just the two of us, I worried it might get strange or awkward when we were home alone together. Honestly, at that point, I couldn't even begin to imagine what my life would be like, surrounded by two women of my mother's generation. But I couldn't deny the strange, unidentifiable feeling that bloomed in my chest, a mixture of nervous tension and a thrilling sense of anticipation. When I told my sister and brother-in-law the news, Mark seemed visibly relieved, though he tried to hide it for my sister's sake. If I was moving out, they could finally get back to their sweet newlywed life without me in the way. Sarah was worried, asking a million questions about my new landladies. But when I explained the situation, she eventually agreed it was a good opportunity. Just behave yourself and don't cause any trouble, Isarel, she said, giving me a hug. And so that weekend, I moved into my new home. I was given a small but comfortable room next to the entryway. It was sunny and felt private. Most of my belongings were just clothes, so unpacking was quick. After I'd mostly settled in, Amelia came to my door. Congratulations on the move, she said with a warm smile. Now, come on, let's talk. She led me back to the living room. It was clear she was a person who liked to talk. Amelia laid out a few ground rules for our communal life. She and Isabella would handle all the cooking, but she expected me to help out with chores like cleaning and laundry. I replied that of course I would, and that I would also be responsible for taking out the trash and recycling. Amelia seemed pleased with my eager attitude. She casually touched my arm while praising me for being such a responsible young man. At first, her touch startled me, but I quickly chalked it up to a friendly, sociable gesture. I was determined to make a good impression. Amelia seemed to have a lot to say, and I settled in for a long conversation. Just then, we heard the front door open and someone else walked in. It was the other aunt, Isabella. I stood up and introduced myself. Isabella was more boldly fashionable than Amelia, with dramatic makeup and a chic, stylish haircut. She had a mischievous, almost devilish air about her. Amelia has told me so much about you, she said, her voice a low, playful purr. She shook my hand firmly. I'm so happy to have a young man around the house. It'll be like having a son. She then told a risque joke that made me blush. In that moment, I had a distinct feeling that living with these two aunts was going to be anything but a normal roommate situation. Of course, they both seemed like wonderful people, but I felt a strange sense of being off balance, as if my own mind was being subtly pulled in two different directions. Amelia, the talkative, nurturing one, and Isabella, the mischievous little devil. I knew I had to be on my best behavior to stay on their good side. That night, the three of us had dinner together for the first time. We each had a beer, and it was fun listening to the two aunts talk. They seemed to get along perfectly, their conversation flowing effortlessly. I was grateful that they made an effort to include me, asking me about my new job and my friends. The atmosphere was so lively and fun, it reminded me of being at a college party. As we were laughing and talking, I glanced at the clock and realized it was almost midnight. I had work the next day, so I excused myself. Isabella, I learned, worked in insurance and left for work early in the morning. Amelia didn't seem to have a job, perhaps because she had received a comfortable settlement in her divorce. She spent her days at home, often spreading a yoga mat in the living room and following workout videos on her phone. Because of this, she was almost always in leggings. And honestly, the sight of her beautiful, toned body was both impressive and a little distracting. I didn't know where to look. On days when Isabella worked late, I would often spend time alone with Amelia. Every time she saw me, she would launch into a new story, a new conversation, as if she had a backlog of things she needed to say. This went on for about a week. Then came a Friday night that would change everything. Isabella had gone on a family trip and wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. I'd thought about going back to Ohio to visit my parents, but I was exhausted from my first full week of work. I decided to just relax at home for the weekend. When I got home from work, Amelia was in the living room in the middle of a yoga session. You look tired, she said, gracefully moving into a new pose. When I admitted that my body felt a little stiff, she immediately stopped what she was doing. I'll teach you some stretches to relieve fatigue, she urged. And so, before I knew it, I was on the floor in the living room next to her, following along with a stretching video. She was an excellent teacher, guiding my movements. As she did, she would casually touch my thigh to correct my form or press on my back to deepen a stretch. To be honest, it felt a little strange, but I'd never been in a situation like this before, so I didn't know what to make of it. I'd read online that women sometimes use touch as a way to send a signal. But Amelia was my friend's aunt, an older woman. I was reluctant to let my mind go to such a scandalous place. I tried to suppress those thoughts and just focus on the stretches. After we finished, Amelia said, "It's Friday night. Let's have a beer." My body felt loose and relaxed from the intense stretching, and the idea of a cold beer was incredibly appealing. So I found myself drinking alone with Amelia. The three of us always kept the fridge stocked with beer and snacks. The combination of my tired body, the deep stretching, and the alcohol made me feel like I was melting. Was that why? Because the woman I was looking at as we talked, Amelia, suddenly looked incredibly, overwhelmingly attractive. On that night, when it was just the two of us, a sudden, powerful urge to cross a line washed over me. Maybe her repeated touches during our stretching session were a sign. Maybe she was waiting for an invitation from me. That expectation began to build inside me. Amelia, as if she could read my mind, looked at me and said, "Why are you staring at me so much?" There was a knowing, meaningful expression on her face. Emboldened by the alcohol, I decided to take a chance. "Because you're very attractive," I said, my voice a little shaky. The aunt asked me what was so attractive about her, and she deliberately leaned closer to me. When I told her that her figure was like a woman in her 20s, she smiled that meaningful smile again and said, "Well, that's what happens when you keep up with your exercise." Then she brazenly started caressing my thigh. I finally couldn't resist her temptation and told her how I felt, that I wanted to spend a fun time with her. The aunt came closer to me as if she had been waiting for my words. We naturally held hands and moved to her bedroom. That was how I made love to my aunt. She was surprisingly aggressive and gave me a passionate lead that seemed to pull my soul out. I followed her lead as if I were possessed by something. It was our first time making love, but it was just right, as if we had been confirming our compatibility for years. My aunt also seemed to be satisfied with making love with me, who was young, and she met her best before I did. When my aunt whispered in my ear that I didn't have to worry about it, I couldn't control myself and lost my reason. I seemed to be completely obsessed with my aunt. I asked my aunt if she wanted to continue this relationship in the future. The aunt asked me back, as much as that, it was good, and I said yes. When I told her that I wanted to continue dating her as a lover, she pinched my arm and teased me about how cute it was. Then, we woke up after a short nap and made love again. Since the two of us were alone without the eldest aunt, my aunt didn't hesitate to make a voice. That appearance excited me even more. After finishing the second love act, I was completely awake and fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, there was a woman who was still sleeping next to me. I remembered last night's events clearly and felt sweet. The aunt noticed the sign and woke up, and she really made her dense love for the first time in a long time. I was able to sleep well. I smiled brightly, wondering if I'd ever slept so deeply with such satisfaction. And on that Saturday, we ate all day, made love, slept, woke up again, and made love. Aunt, you're young after all, so it's different. It was the first time they had made love so many times in a day, and they looked happy. So we spent 2 days spending intensive time. On Sunday, my aunt and I were completely tired and had to be a little calmer. In the afternoon, the two of us took a walk in the nearby Japanese garden. And late at night, the eldest aunt came back. The aunt threw herself on the sofa and began to tell the story of her family trip one after another. It's good to travel if you take a star, but it's really I'm tired. However, the eldest aunt seemed to have a really sharp intuition. Apparently, no one talked about anything, but the eldest aunt looked at me and Aunt Mayo alternately and said playfully that it was a strange atmosphere. And because I was away, I joked that something had happened to the two of us. At that moment, the events of Sakuya flashed through my mind, and I felt my face turn red, and I was very flustered. I tried to fake the place, but the three of us spent time together in the living room that night. However, it seems that Aunt Miyoko was telling her eldest aunt about what happened between me and Aunt Miyoko. After that, every time the eldest aunt saw me, she began to smile with a meaningful look on her face. From that smile, the eldest aunt was all I knew that he was guessing. And a few days later, at night, Aunt Nagako asked me about my room. My aunt entered my room, sat on my bed, and began to talk. I heard everything from Miyoko, and I haven't dated a man since I got divorced. He brazenly began to charm me to see if he would date me. I wondered if it would strain my relationship with my aunt. Then the eldest aunt reassured me that she had told Miyoko everything and that Miyoko was not the type to get upset about such things. Then he took my hand and made me sit down next to him. What man in the world would refuse a woman who came close to him? I decided to spend the night with my eldest aunt that night. The devilish eldest aunt was also a type of demon at night. He kept biting me and completely took my soul. I could hardly sleep that night. Before dawn, the eldest aunt returned to her room, saying that she was very satisfied with her love affair after a long time. That's how I started a dating life with two aunts at the same time. The two aunts seemed to be comfortable sharing me. He continued to live the same life as before. The three of us had breakfast together, and when we came home in the evening, the three of us talked while drinking Japanese sake and beer. It's just that the love affair at night was added. So we became open and secretive in our love affair. One day with Aunt Miko, and the next day with the eldest son's aunt, as if they were taking turns. So there were days when I made love with my aunts without a day off for a whole week. Both had to respond to their level of hunger twice in one night. It wasn't a bad thing, but there were times when I felt physically demanding. There were days when I felt scared of the night. However, the two aunts treated me very kindly and satisfied me deeply. So, to be honest, I felt much better. I'm sharing my love with my two aunts to the fullest. I haven't had a chance to make love with two aunts at the same time yet, but I have a feeling that someday I'll have such an opportunity. I'm still embarrassed to wear it, so I haven't talked about it yet, but I feel like it's going to happen for some reason. The subtle joint life with two aunts is very satisfying for me, and the two aunts also seem to be satisfied. This means that I have to manage my physical strength well. That's all for my story. Thank you very much for listening. Reflection on the sense of life. In this way, I began to live a life of sharing a secret love with two aunts, and I began to think deeply about my sense of life. Love is not bound by age or form. Both Aunt Miko and the eldest son's aunt have lived more than half of their lives. The loneliness they have, and to love again, the desperate feelings of seeking and seeking youth are so deep that I can't imagine them in my 20s, I guess there is. In particular, through this experience, I was keenly aware that true love is more important than anything else. Of course, they have physical needs, but I think what they really wanted was someone who needed them, a partner they could talk to, and the joy of being treated as a woman. For me, they are experienced teachers, doting mothers, and passionate lovers. In Japanese culture, there's a tradition of honoring the elderly, but here I felt that older women were taught the joy of living and the depth of love in a slightly different way. This community life will end someday. Maybe the time will come when I get married, or maybe they will take a new path in life. However, this dense and exciting time will surely become a priceless treasure in my life. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns. I want to cherish this bad love with gratitude. And I sincerely hope that two attractive women will treat me with love and sincerity so that I can postpone the days full of happiness as much as possible. Love is when the other person's heart and your own heart resonate with each other. We are in that resonance right now. May this warm and hot time last. Yes, I looked up at the night sky and prayed gently. Alex's story is a reminder that life doesn't always follow a straight line. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are found in the most unexpected places, challenging every rule we thought we knew. Is this a story of incredible luck or a complex web of human emotions? Can love truly exist and thrive in such a structure? Where is the line between fulfillment and sustainability? We would love to hear your thoughts. If this story made you think, please leave a comment below. Let us know how it made you feel. And if you want to hear more unique stories about the human condition, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.